They laughed when I signed the paper. A single dollar, that's all it took to own the dock they had called the neighborhood's eyesore. It was a quiet morning by Clearwater Lake. Mist rolled over the water like smoke from a fading dream, and the sound of distant lawnmowers mixed with the faint hum of boat engines. I stood there, holding the deed, feeling the old wood creak beneath my boots. The dock looked dead, boards warped, nails rusted, ropes frayed. But to me, it felt alive. Forgotten, yes. But not gone. Across the street, members of the Lakeview HOA whispered and smirked. Their leader, a sharp-tongued woman named Brenda Whitlock, leaned on her pristine SUV and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Guess we found someone desperate enough to buy our trash." I smiled. I didn't tell her I wasn't desperate, I was patient. They saw rot. I saw history. They saw waste. I saw leverage. The property I just bought wasn't just an old dock, it was attached to a lapsed riparian deed, one that technically extended 50 feet into the waterline. But I kept that part to myself. No one in the HOA cared to check. They just wanted the ugly dock gone from their postcard perfect view. As the sun climbed higher, their laughter echoed across the water. I took one last look at the dock and whispered to myself, let them laugh now. Behind me, a construction truck pulled up at Brenda's house, another expansion, another private improvement on HOA funds. They were powerful, arrogant, and certain they ran this lake like their own empire. But what they didn't know was that the very land they mocked, that rotten dock I'd bought for $1, held the quiet key to their future. And soon, I would learn just how deep their corruption went. Before all of this, before the courtroom, the cameras, and the headlines, Clearwater Lake was my peace. I'd moved here 2 years before the dock deal. After losing my wife, I needed a quiet place to rebuild my life. The lake was supposed to be that place, calm mornings, honest work, and people who waved when they passed your driveway. For a while, it really was that simple. My small home sat at the far end of the community, where the paved road turned to gravel. The HOA called it the outskirts, as if distance from their neatly trimmed lawns made me less of a neighbor. I didn't mind. My view was better, open lake, tall pine trees, and the soft call of loons echoing at dawn. Most of my neighbors were decent folks. There was Tom, the retired firefighter who fished every morning, and Mrs. Green, who baked pies for everyone on Memorial Day. But the real power in Lakeview wasn't the people, it was the HOA board. They ran everything, the mailboxes, the shoreline, even the color of your deck lights. Their meetings were less about community and more about control. At first, I tried to fit in. I attended my first HOA meeting at the clubhouse, an over-decorated room with a coffee machine that never worked. Brenda Whitlock sat at the head of the table like a queen on her throne, her pearls gleaming under the fluorescent light. She had 2 loyal board members beside her, Rick, a slick real estate agent, and Nancy, who treated the HOA rules like scripture. They welcomed me with tight smiles and hollow compliments. Brenda called me the quiet one from the gravel road, and joked that I should keep that rustic charm. I laughed politely, not realizing those words were really a warning, a reminder of where I stood. Weeks turned into months, and I kept to myself. I fixed up my porch, restored an old canoe, and spent evenings watching sunsets bleed across the lake. I noticed how the HOA slowly tightened its grip, new fees appeared, property inspections became more frequent, and letters started landing in mailboxes with friendly threats hidden between the lines. Tom once told me, "You don't cross Brenda. She knows everyone, even the county inspector." I believed him, until I noticed the small things they didn't want anyone to see. One morning, while walking by the lake, I saw survey stakes in the ground, bright orange flags fluttering just beyond my property line. A construction crew was marking measurements near the old dock. When I asked one of the workers what was happening, he shrugged. "Some new expansion. HOA project, I think. Private marina or something." My stomach sank. The HOA's last newsletter had mentioned nothing about it. Later that evening, I brought it up at the community meeting. Brenda smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, that old dock area. It's just an eyesore. We're cleaning it up for safety. Don't worry about it." Her tone was syrupy, too smooth. Rick nodded behind her, pretending to shuffle papers. I could tell they were hiding something. Over the next few weeks, strange things began happening. A letter arrived saying my fence might violate visual harmony guidelines. My garbage collection day was mysteriously changed, twice. And one night, I noticed Brenda's car parked near the lake after midnight, lights off, engine running. The next morning, the survey stakes were gone. I remember standing by the water, feeling the cold wind whip against my face. Something about the way they moved, the way they smiled when I asked questions, it didn't feel like neighbors anymore. It felt like a trap being set in slow motion. Then, one afternoon, as I returned from town, I found a survey map wedged under my door, no sender, no note. It showed parcel boundaries around Clearwater Lake, and one thing stood out, the small strip of land labeled Dock Parcel 47B, technically not owned by the HOA anymore. I didn't know who sent it. Maybe someone inside had grown tired of Brenda's games. But as I stared at the map, I realized what it meant. The HOA had been planning to claim property they didn't legally own. That night, sitting on my porch, I looked across the lake at the dock, rotting, leaning, forgotten, and whispered, "So that's your game." The crickets chirped, the lake shimmered under the moonlight, and I knew, things were about to change. I didn't find the truth all at once, it came quietly, like a ripple that becomes a wave. For a few days, I kept that anonymous survey map in my desk drawer. But it gnawed at me. Every time I looked out across the lake and saw Brenda's house, with its perfect hedges and flagpole, I wondered how much of Clearwater Lake she believed she owned. So, one rainy afternoon, I drove down to the county records office. The clerk, a polite woman named Helen, helped me pull up the Lakeview HOA's property files. They had dozens of parcels registered under the association's name, walking trails, picnic lots, and a community shoreline. But when I typed parcel 47B, the screen showed something different. Owner, vacant. Last registered owner, Clearwater Resort Holdings, dissolved 1999. And right below it, in faint ink, available for private acquisition. That's when it hit me, the HOA didn't own the dock. They never had. I sat there for a while, staring at the screen as rain tapped against the window. The dock wasn't just old wood and nails, it was a forgotten piece of lakefront property with independent water rights. Whoever owned it could technically develop or lease that section of the lake. That's why the surveyors had been there. That's why Brenda had smiled so confidently at the meeting. She and Rick weren't cleaning up the eyesore. They were preparing to quietly annex the dock into HOA property, then lease it to a local boating company Rick's firm represented. The deal was already in motion. They just needed no one to notice. But someone had. The next morning, I called Helen again and asked if I could purchase the parcel. She checked the system and said, if it's unclaimed, yes, though it'll need reassessment. But it won't cost much, probably $1 or $2 in transfer fees. $1. The same dollar that would one day echo louder than all their money combined. I signed the paperwork the next day, quietly, without telling a soul. Within a week, I had the deed, a simple sheet of paper, notarized and legal. Parcel 47B, Clearwater Lake Dock Lot. But while I was careful, the HOA was not. At the next board meeting, Brenda announced plans for a community marina project, funded by new HOA assessments. Her tone was smug, her eyes met mine as if daring me to object. I raised my hand. Do we own that shoreline? A hush fell over the room. Brenda froze for half a second, just long enough to give herself away, before replying, of course we do. It's been ours for years. I didn't argue. I just smiled. Because by then, I knew the truth. And the deed sat safely in my briefcase. That night, sitting on the dock under a full moon, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet. Just clarity. They had built their control on lies, paperwork, and arrogance. But I had something stronger, the patience to let them bury themselves deeper. So I made a promise under that silver sky, I won't fight in anger. I'll wait. I'd let them finish their project. Let them invest their time, their money, and their pride into land they didn't own. And when it was done, when every nail was in place, I'd show them who the real owner of Clearwater Lake was. From that night on, every sunrise at Clearwater Lake felt different. The air was sharper, cleaner, like the world was waiting for something to unfold. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. The HOA thought they had everything under control, permits, blueprints, even investors. But the one thing they didn't have was the truth, and I intended to use it like a blade. I began my plan quietly. Each morning, I walked the lake trail with a notebook in hand, jotting down the HOA's progress. They'd begun sending construction crews to the dock area, trucks, surveyors, even a small floating barge. They were rebuilding my property, board by board. I took photos. Every angle. Every date. At night, I researched. County ordinances, property rights, environmental regulations, I read them all. My dining table became a battlefield of documents and maps, lit only by a single lamp and the reflection of the lake through the window. That's when I discovered something even bigger. The HOA had applied for a special grant under the state's Community Waterfront Development Program. Rick's real estate firm was listed as a co-beneficiary. They were using HOA member funds and government money to improve land they didn't legally control, which was fraud if proven. But I needed evidence. Not speculation. So, I went to the county deeds archive, a dimly lit basement lined with old file drawers. After 2 hours of digging, I found it, the original transfer document from 1999 when the Clearwater Resort dissolved. It clearly stated that Parcel 47B was excluded from HOA consolidation because it had independent riparian rights and a private deed clause. Meaning, it could never be claimed by the HOA. I copied it, notarized it, and stored the original in a fireproof case at home. Still, I stayed quiet. The project continued. Brenda smiled wider than ever at meetings, calling it the Lakeview Marina Project. They sent out glossy flyers with digital renderings, luxury boat slips, rental offices, and a members-only cafe. The neighborhood buzzed with excitement. Only a few residents, like old Tom, looked uneasy. "Feels wrong," he told me one afternoon. They didn't ask anyone before spending all that money. I just nodded. "Give it time, Tom." By summer, the new marina was nearly complete, metal docks, painted signs, even a ribbon-cutting ceremony planned for July. Brenda walked around like a celebrity, and Rick bragged that their project would raise every property's value by 20%. But every board they hammered, every nail they drove, was going into my land. I spent my evenings preparing the final move. First, I met with an environmental attorney, a calm, sharp man named David Miller. I showed him the deed, the documents, and the HOA's grant filings. He flipped through the pages slowly, then looked at me and said, "If what you're telling me is true, they just built a multimillion-dollar structure on property they don't own." "Exactly." He smiled. "Then all you need to do is wait until they cut that ribbon." So I did. Meanwhile, I filed quiet notices with the county, updating my ownership records, reactivating the old parcel ID, and registering the riparian rights in my name. It was all public record, but buried so deep in bureaucracy that no one would notice until it was too late. The night before the ribbon cutting, I stood at the end of the new marina. The wooden planks gleamed under the moonlight, the water calm as glass. I ran my hand over the rail, the smell of fresh varnish thick in the air. This wasn't just a dock anymore. It was a monument to their arrogance, and my patience. As I turned to leave, I saw headlights on the road. Brenda's car. She stepped out, her heels clicking against the gravel, a glass of wine in hand. "Well, look who's here," she said, smirking. "Admiring what real vision looks like." I smiled back. "Oh, I've been admiring it for months." She didn't understand the double meaning. But soon she would. The next morning, the HOA board, local officials, and neighbors gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Balloons, cameras, champagne, the works. Brenda held the scissors proudly. As she prepared to cut the ribbon, I stood in the back, silent. My lawyer was beside me, holding a thin folder. David leaned over and whispered, "Ready?" I nodded. They had no idea what was coming. The morning of the ribbon-cutting glowed like a picture-perfect postcard. The lake shimmered under a cloudless sky, the air full of laughter, champagne, and expensive perfume. It was the kind of day meant for victory, and for someone's downfall. I arrived quietly, dressed in a simple blue shirt and worn leather shoes. No fanfare, no camera, just calm purpose. Beside me stood my attorney, David Miller, holding a brown envelope that carried more weight than any speech that day. The HOA board was buzzing with pride. Rick strutted like a salesman at a trade show, flashing smiles at investors. Nancy adjusted the banners that read Lakeview Marina, a new chapter in luxury. And Brenda, well, Brenda was glowing. She stood at the podium, her pearl necklace gleaming in the sunlight. She tapped the microphone. "Today, we celebrate progress, community, and vision. The Lakeview HOA has turned an abandoned dock into a state-of-the-art marina. A symbol of what we can achieve, together." Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. Drones hovered above, filming every second. I waited. Then came the ribbon. Brenda lifted the oversized scissors and turned to the crowd with her signature grin. "On behalf of the HOA, I declare, a violation of property law," I said, stepping forward. The crowd went still. Brenda froze mid-sentence. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with disbelief. I held up a document, the original deed to parcel 47B. "Before you finish that ceremony, Brenda, you might want to check whose property this marina is standing on." A murmur rippled through the audience. Rick frowned. "What are you talking about?" David stepped forward, his tone calm and steady. "As of legal record, this land, including the structure built upon it, belongs to Mr. Evan Cole. Purchased from the county for $1. Filed, recorded, and notarized 6 months ago." Gasps. Cameras zoomed in. Someone in the crowd whispered, "He owns the marina." Brenda laughed, but it was shaky now. "That's absurd. The HOA has owned this shoreline for decades." I handed her a copy of the county record. "You owned everything except this lot. The dock was never consolidated under HOA property after the Clearwater Resort dissolved in 1999. You just built your $1 million project on private land." Her smile vanished. Rick snatched the document from her and skimmed it, his face draining of color. David continued, "Not only that, but your grant filings listed this property as HOA owned. That's federal grant fraud." A silence heavier than thunder fell across the marina. Even the waves seemed to pause. Then came the sound, not of applause, not of argument, but the faint click of camera shutters. The local news crew, invited to film Brenda's big day, caught every word. Within an hour, the celebration turned into chaos. Board members argued. Residents demanded answers. Someone called the county inspector. Brenda tried to order everyone off her property, but the sheriff's deputy who arrived just pointed to the deed and said, "Ma'am, this dock legally belongs to Mr. Cole. You're trespassing." I didn't gloat. I didn't shout. I simply stepped onto the dock, my dock, and looked out over the lake. The next few weeks were a storm. The HOA tried everything: emergency meetings, legal threats, even offers to buy the property back. I declined them all. They'd spent over $1.2 million on construction, landscaping, and marketing, all on land they didn't own. When the county launched its investigation, Rick resigned. The grant committee froze all HOA funding. And Brenda? She was voted out in disgrace after it was revealed she had personally approved the fraudulent filings. But that wasn't the end. My lawyer and I filed a quiet claim, seeking damages for unauthorized development and use of private property. We didn't even go to trial. The HOA settled. They offered me $4 million to purchase the marina and avoid further legal exposure. I signed the papers slowly, almost reverently. The same hand that once paid $1 now signed for $4 million. When it was done, I walked back to the lake one last time. Brenda was there, no pearls, no cameras, just defeat in her eyes. She asked softly, "Why didn't you warn us?" I looked at the water, the sunlight flickering like tiny sparks of truth. "I did," I said quietly. "You just didn't listen when I asked who owned the shoreline." She looked down, speechless. As she walked away, I felt no triumph, just peace. Justice didn't need fireworks. It just needed time. It's been a year since that day. The marina still stands, shining, busy, and alive, but it's no longer theirs. It's mine. Every morning, I walk the same wooden boards that once sagged under rot and neglect. I watch the boats sway gently in the water, the sunlight painting the lake in gold. Sometimes, I think about how small that moment seemed, handing over a single dollar, and how much it changed everything. Most of the old HOA board is gone now. Brenda moved away quietly, her house sold to new owners who wave when they pass. Rick started a new firm in another county, his name nowhere near Lakeview's newsletters anymore. The neighborhood feels lighter, quieter. People talk again, without fear of fines or letters. I didn't buy the marina for revenge. Not really. I kept it as a reminder that patience and truth don't shout. They whisper, and they wait. Sometimes, visitors ask if I ever plan to sell. I just smile and tell them, it's not about money. It's about the principle of ownership, not of land, but of peace. One evening, I sat at the end of the dock, the sky bleeding orange and violet, the water calm as glass. A gentle wind rippled through the flags, and for the first time in years, I felt completely still inside. It wasn't victory I felt. It was closure. Because in the end, justice isn't about watching others fall, it's about standing quietly when the truth finally stands with you. They laughed when I bought a rotting dock for $1. Now, they pay me rent to tie their boats to it. If you enjoyed this true poetic justice story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to NHK HOA Story, where every day, we bring you emotional, intelligent stories of justice that money can't buy.